What is good, Who Dat Nation? Ross Jackson here. The NFL Draft has officially concluded, and these are the Canal Street Chronicles. Just when we thought that the Saints were done in the 2020 NFL Draft, they fooled us all, trading back into day 3. Now remember, they trade away all 4 of their day 3 picks in order to move back into the 3rd round at the end of day 2 to select Dayton tight end Adam Troutman. Now, why did they move back into the 7th round? Well, they were going after a quarterback. Not the quarterback that I expected, though. I thought they were going to really come back in and take a shot at Anthony Gordon out of Washington State. I thought he'd be a really interesting backup and a really interesting sort of developmental quarterback to bring around. But instead, they go with Mississippi State quarterback Tommy Stevens. Now, Tommy spent a little bit of time at Penn State as well. In fact, most of his career in college was at Penn State, 3 seasons there before transferring to Mississippi State. Now, the question has been asked a couple of times, why would the Saints trade back into the draft in order to select this guy when they could have just waited until undrafted free agency? Apparently, according to Sean Payton, that was the plan. However, they felt like there were other teams that were going to be interested in grabbing this guy. And when you look at it, and if you look at the trend that the Saints have started in the past, it absolutely makes sense that other teams would be interested, especially when you consider last year's draft with, let's say, the Chargers, who brought in Easton Stick to try to mold him into a Taysom Hill role. The Bucks signed Nick Fitzgerald for the same purpose. You saw Trace McSorley go to Baltimore last year as well. So there are a lot of different players out there that within the NFL, other teams were trying to mold into that Taysom Hill type role. So it makes sense that somebody else and another team would have been interested in jumping in and grabbing Tommy Stevens. So the Saints trade back in, but they don't pay a big price here. In order to get back into the 2020 7th round, they traded a 2021 6th rounder, of which you can expect them to still end up getting anyway, because they're supposed to get a 6th round compensatory pick for AJ Klein, who signed with the Buffalo Bills earlier this offseason rather. So with that, the Saints are still in good position here, having traded away a future 3rd and a future 6th to still draft at least once in every round of the draft in 2021. So they didn't really give up a lot. They essentially swapped picks in a way. So this is a really smart move by the Saints in terms of being able to go out there and get a guy that they believe in, like Tommy Stevens. Now, is Tommy Stevens going to be groomed to be the sort of 3rd quarterback? No, we actually ended up getting that answer anyway in terms of who that's going to be. So expect more content talking about that potential. But the real idea for me when it comes to Tommy Stevens is that he ends up getting groomed into being another Taysom Hill and being a Taysom Hill role. 6'5", 237 pounds. He caught 14 passes, all while at Penn State. He was used a little bit more in that expanded offensive weapon role while he was at Penn State than while he was at Mississippi State. But still, this is a guy that threw 15 touchdowns and only 121 completions. Only completed 60% of his passes, though, while in college. So that can be a little bit alarming, but he wasn't a huge sample size guy. Played behind quarterbacks, dealt with some injuries as well. A little bit like the Taysom Hill story. Taysom Hill didn't really get stuck behind quarterbacks, but didn't have a huge sample size because of the amount of injuries that he had to deal with throughout his time at BYU. So now the Saints have an option in Tommy Stevens, if they can develop him into that Taysom Hill role, to still have Taysom Hill's offensive weapon role, the slasher role, involved in their offense next year, if Taysom Hill is indeed to be the QB1 after Drew Brees retires, which we expect to happen, or at least I expect to happen after the 2020 season. So this is a really, really smart move by the Saints to maintain sort of the makeup and the fabric of their offense, even when Taysom Hill ends up becoming the successor, or even when Taysom Hill is no longer on the team, however that ends up working out. But it does speak a lot to this move, to what it is that Sean Payton believes this offense needs and how important he believes Taysom Hill's role is in this offense, that he would essentially go out there, trade back into a draft that he was completely resolved to just sit back and let it sort of play out the rest of the way. But they traded back in with the intent of adding somebody else to make sure that they can try to maintain this role in the Saints offense. Now, don't forget, Taysom Hill, who sort of helped to build this role in the Saints offense, was an undrafted free agent himself. So just because this guy is a 7th rounder doesn't mean necessarily that he's invaluable or that he's not going to be able to come in and do this, because they did it with an undrafted free agent in the first place. It will be interesting to see, though, if Tommy Stevens ends up picking up some of the special teams role, because he did run a 4.49 at his pro day and had a very, very good shuttle run as well at just over 4.1. So he did a really, really great job at his pro day, even though some of his combine day didn't look great. he really showed you all the athleticism that he packs, and especially at that size, at 6'5", 237, you get that size and that speed together, and somebody that can go out there and catch passes. He caught 2 touchdowns when he was at Penn State on those 14 receptions that I mentioned earlier. Also ran for 12 touchdowns as well over his entire time, whether it be with Penn State or Mississippi State. So he really packs a lot of versatility into what we're used to seeing in that Taysom Hill role. So a very, very interesting couple of days here for New Orleans. That's only sure to get more interesting as we move forward. The Saints also signed 12 undrafted free agents on Saturday as well, so they remain active and still have some roster spots available around their draft picks, their initial roster, and their undrafted free agent additions as well. They have some really, really good potential in this undrafted free agent class as well, signing Tennessee wide receiver Marquez Callaway, as well as linebacker Joe Bacci as well, who was somebody that I really expected to be a early day three guy at the latest. So they add another linebacker. They also bring in Texas defensive tackle Malcolm Roach, who weighed in at about 297 at the combine and ran a 4.8 440. So he got some athleticism for real that they'll end up trying to put on the field. So he's somebody that I would definitely keep an eye out on. And perhaps my favorite undrafted free agent, Calvin Throckmorton out of Oregon, amongst others, but he's somebody that's extremely versatile, has played 4 different places on the offensive line and only allowed 1 sack in his entire time at Oregon as a part of that stellar offensive line up in the Pacific Northwest. So a very interesting and exciting day 3 and lots to cover, just recapping that 3rd day of the draft, but we'll be back with you soon to recap the entire draft as a whole, talk a little bit more about all of these undrafted free agents, and talk a little bit more about some of the other news that took place after the draft concluded.